Chapter 7 shows how power really works. One of the most unsettling truths in The Wire is that it understands power almost exactly the way it operates in modern society. Power is usually not loud, it is procedural. Most fiction portrays power through dramatic individuals, dictators, masterminds, violent villains, corrupt kings, but in real life, power often works through budgets, meetings, metrics, staffing decisions, legal language, policy, bureaucracy, incentives, paperwork. And psychologically, that kind of power is far more difficult to fight because it feels impersonal and invisible. No single person appears fully responsible, yet entire lives are shaped by it. That's why The Wire feels so disturbingly realistic. Human beings naturally look for visible causes. We prefer stories where one bad person causes the problem, because psychologically that feels manageable, but modern systems rarely operate that way. Instead, decisions emerge from institutional incentives, political calculations, economic pressures, organizational survival, fragmented responsibility. This creates what psychologists and sociologists sometimes call diffusion of responsibility. Everyone contributes to harmful outcomes, but no one person fully experiences themselves as the villain. That makes systems extraordinarily powerful, one of the deepest truths The Wire captures. Bureaucracy can control lives more effectively than overt force. For example, a funding cut destroys a community program. Staffing quotas reduce meaningful policing. School policies reshape classroom behavior. Political optics determine resource allocation. Statistical targets distort priorities. Nobody screams, nobody gives evil speeches. A form gets signed, a meeting happens, a budget shifts, entire neighborhoods experience consequences. Psychologically, this is difficult for people to emotionally process because human brains respond more strongly to visible threats than systemic ones. A violent criminal feels emotionally obvious. An administrative policy quietly producing suffering feels abstract, even when its impact is larger. Most people believe behavior is driven mainly by character, but psychologically, incentives are often more powerful than values. If a system rewards appearance over truth, short-term success over long-term reform, obedience over honesty, numbers over human outcomes, people gradually adapt their behavior accordingly, not always consciously. That's the disturbing part. A politician may begin with sincere ideals. A police commander may genuinely want reform. A school administrator may truly care about children. But over time, promotions, pressure, funding, public image, career survival reshape priorities. This is institutional conditioning. The person slowly learns what gets rewarded here. And human beings adapt remarkably quickly to reward structures. In The Wire, statistics repeatedly become more important than lived reality. That is psychologically accurate because metrics simplify complexity. A city's suffering becomes crime percentages, arrest numbers, test scores, budget reports, polling data. This creates emotional distance. Leaders begin managing representations of reality instead of reality itself. Psychologically, numbers provide control, clarity, defensibility, reduced uncertainty. But metrics can distort priorities. When careers depend on statistics, people unconsciously optimize the statistic itself. For example, police manipulate reporting categories. Schools narrow their teaching toward tests. Hospitals rush patients through systems. Companies prioritize measurable productivity over human well-being. The measurement slowly replaces the mission. One of the greatest insights in The Wire is that systems resist change even when many individuals inside them recognize dysfunction. Why? Because institutions prioritize stability. Change threatens. Hierarchy, funding, predictability, careers, identity, political alliances. So even well-intentioned people become absorbed into maintaining the existing structure. This is institutional inertia, the enormous psychological and organizational force resisting meaningful transformation. The system survives by exhausting reformers. That feels painfully authentic because many viewers recognize this from real life. The most effective systems of power often become normalized. People stop seeing them as choices. They begin feeling natural, inevitable, permanent. This is psychologically significant. Once a structure feels inevitable, resistance declines. People adapt rather than challenge it. For example, impossible housing costs, workplace exploitation, school inequality, healthcare bureaucracy, political dysfunction may begin feeling like just the way the world works. That normalization protects systems from scrutiny. The power becomes invisible precisely because it is everywhere. One reason systems can produce harmful outcomes without obvious villains. Responsibility becomes distributed. Each individual performs only one small function: filing reports, approving budgets, enforcing quotas, following procedures. Psychologically, this reduces personal guilt. The person tells themselves, "I'm just doing my job. Those are the rules. I don't make policy." No single action feels monstrous. Yet collectively, the system can produce enormous suffering. This fragmentation is psychologically dangerous because humans are more morally sensitive to direct harm than to indirect participation. People inside institutions often understand ethical problems clearly, but they also understand the consequences. Speaking openly may threaten income, promotion, social belonging, professional reputation, job security. So psychological survival instincts activate. The person begins balancing morality versus self-preservation. Over time, many people adapt by lowering expectations, accepting compromise, normalizing dysfunction, emotionally disengaging. This is not always cowardice. Often it's exhaustion. The system gradually teaches people the limits of resistance. Victor grows up believing government exists to improve society. He studies economics and public policy because he genuinely wants to help struggling communities. At 27, he joins a city housing department. Initially, he feels inspired. He imagines helping vulnerable families, improving neighborhoods, creating fairer systems. But quickly, he notices something strange. Meetings focus less on people and more on funding allocations, reporting structures, political optics, budget deadlines, performance metrics. The suffering itself feels oddly distant. Victor proposes expanding emergency housing support for low-income families. His supervisor agrees privately that the idea is morally necessary, but then explains the program isn't politically popular. Budget optics matter. Officials want lower visible spending. Election cycles affect priorities. Victor feels confused. The issue isn't whether families need help. Everyone already knows they do. The real question is, what is politically survivable? That realization unsettles him deeply. Months later, the department celebrates improved housing numbers publicly. News outlets praise progress. But Victor knows the hidden truth. Qualification standards quietly changed. Vulnerable families were removed from eligibility. Temporary placements were counted as long-term success. Difficult cases were deprioritized because they hurt metrics. Officially, the system improved. In reality, many people became more unstable. The institution protected the appearance of success. Victor keeps pushing internally for reform. At first, co-workers admire his idealism, but gradually he notices subtle resistance. Invitations stop coming. Supervisors become cautious around him. Ambitious colleagues distance themselves. His proposals disappear into endless review processes. Nobody openly attacks him. The system simply absorbs and neutralizes pressure. This is psychologically important. Modern institutions often suppress change passively rather than violently. Exhaustion becomes the enforcement mechanism. Years pass. Victor slowly changes. He starts using bureaucratic language automatically. Resource limitations, stakeholder concerns, manageable outcomes. The human suffering becomes psychologically abstract. Not because he stopped caring, because constant exposure plus institutional pressure create emotional distancing, and this protects him psychologically, but it also changes him. One afternoon, Victor visits a housing shelter during winter. A mother quietly asks why her family lost eligibility despite following every rule. Victor knows the real answer. The city altered reporting criteria to improve public metrics, but he cannot explain the entire machinery to her, so he gives a procedural response. Walking away, he feels profound shame because he realizes he has become part of the system he once believed he would change. Years later, Victor trains younger employees. Without realizing it, he repeats phrases older officials once told him. You have to be realistic. Change takes time. Politics complicates everything. This is how the process works. The institution reproduces itself through adaptation, not because every participant is malicious, but because survival inside the structure slowly reshapes perception, language, and emotional response. People connect deeply to this aspect of the wire because modern life often feels controlled by invisible systems rather than obvious villains. Most people have experienced moments where policy mattered more than humanity, metrics mattered more than reality, procedure overruled morality, bureaucracy exhausted change. Institutions protected themselves first. The show understands a disturbing truth. Modern power often does not crush people dramatically. It wears them down administratively. And because the process is slow, procedural, and emotionally fragmented, people gradually adapt to systems they once believed they would resist.